For the last 2 weeks, I have been talking about the idea of taking God seriously. And more than that, I've been talking about taking the anointing that we have as the children of God seriously. It's not something that we do when it's just convenient to do, or it's not something we do just once in a while. This is a complete lifestyle. We are immersed into a lifestyle being like Jesus. So it's something we always have with us. The Scripture teaches clearly that the Spirit of God lives inside of us. Wherever we are, God is there. So we take it seriously. But I need to tell you reality in my life. In my life, I go through maybe days, maybe a little longer than a few days, and I'm really in tune with this idea of taking God seriously. And I see God in different places. And before I make a decision, I think about God and I talk to God. And I go through those times when it works really well, only to find other days and series of days where I don't do that as well. And I begin to rely more on my own thinking, and I make my own choices. And I don't speak to God regularly like I do during those other times. That's the reality in my life. I'm guessing that may be a bit of the reality in your life also. Would I be close to right? It's probably the way we live our lives, because this thing of living for God is a continual effort/battle. So I take you back to the life of David. And after that really ugly episode in the life of David where he made such a mistake, we came to chapter 23, and I've mentioned it a couple of times now, and I'm so thrilled about David in chapter 23 of the book of 1 Samuel, because David will say, God, should I go down there and help those people in the southern part of Judah fight against the Philistines? And God says yes. And the men say, David, that's pretty risky. And David says, God, should I really go? And God says yes. And he just keeps talking like that all through that chapter. And I think, look how wonderfully he's connected to God. But now I come to chapter 27. And it's a long story that cascades all over chapter 27, 28, 29, and 30. So I'm going to hit the highlights of this story. Because as you begin chapter 27, David is acting just like I act so often in my life. David is thinking to himself. He's using his logic to himself. If I would go down into the land of the Philistines and live there with all my soldiers, if I go live in the land of the Philistines, then surely Saul would stop pursuing me there. Now, I can understand his motivation. He's worn out. He's tired of this onslaught from Saul. He's tired of the threat. He's tired of the danger. But to go down and live among the Philistines, the horrible enemies of the Israelites, not only does he think about it, but he goes and does it. Which is a little sideline thought for every one of us. What you think about, you better be careful. You better be careful what you think about, because you may find yourself doing it fairly quickly. Remember my old friend I used to go by and see? Much, much older, has been gone for a long time. Ian Woolman was his name. I used to go by as a young man to see him because I loved to hear his speech. He would say, young man, you be really careful what you start thinking about, because what you start thinking about will probably come true. Well, David starts thinking about going and living with the Philistines, and now he goes. He takes his 600 fighting men. He takes his 2 wives. He takes their wives and their children. And of all places, they go to the king named Achish in Gath, the place where Goliath used to live, and the place where David had gone when he had that last major upsetting episode. And he ended up at Achish in Gath. And remember, he was so afraid. How did he act? He pretended to be a madman. He pretended to be insane. He was so afraid. And Achish said, I don't need another crazy man around me, and sends him away. And now he's going back. And he makes a covenant with Achish. Isn't this interesting? He makes a deal. He makes a promise. He says, if you will give us a place to live, we will go out and fight your battles for you. And so Achish says, okay, you can have that city over there called Ziklag. Now, what a wonderful opportunity. If you've been wandering around the wilderness and desert for a long time, now you have houses, and now you have other benefits. David and his 600 men and their families move into Ziklag. And now every time Achish needs a battle, to win a battle, to fight an enemy, he calls on David. And David and the 600 will go out and they will fight. And it says that David kills every man and every woman. Don't know about children, doesn't say. Every time he goes out and fights, he kills every man and every woman. Now, granted, these are the enemies of the Philistines who are probably also the enemy of the Israelites. But he kills every man and every woman. Seems a bit strange to me. And then he takes the spoils of the battle. If he finds sheep, camel, cattle, goats, donkeys, whatever it is, he brings it back to Achish. And Achish is defeating his enemies and getting rich at the same time and doing nothing. It's a pretty good deal for Achish. In fact, Achish will make this comment if you read through chapters 27, 28, and 29. I'm going to make you my servant forever. I'm going to make you my bodyguard. Achish is pretty smart. It's a pretty good deal. Until. One day, all the Philistine kings and all the Philistine commanders say, we're going to gather together. We're going to team together. And we're going to go fight the Israelites, our most notable enemy. And Achish turns to David and he says, David, you and your 600 men, you're going with me and we're going to fight the Israelites. Now, this is not going the direction that you would think it should go, is it? I mean, he's living in a foreign land with the foreign people. He's fighting for the foreign people. And now he's being called on to go fight against his own people. Maybe he's got relatives in that army. He's going to go fight. But David's made a deal. He's made a promise. He's made a covenant. And so David marches along with Achish. And they get to the spot, the meeting spot. Here are all the Philistine kings together and the commanders. And they look over and they see David. And they say, wait a minute. Achish, what are you doing bringing him here? Isn't this the one they used to sing about? Isn't this the one they used to sing a song that kind of went like this? Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands. And what's going to happen, Achish, if we get in battle and he's there with his fighting men and we're fighting the Israelites, his people, how do you know he's not going to turn and fight for the Israelites and kill us? They obviously know what kind of fighter he is. They obviously know what kind of victories God continues to give. And Achish has no choice. Achish turns reluctantly to David and says, you got to go back home. You got to go back. So David takes his soldiers and they make the long, long march back to Ziklag. Only if you're reading in chapter 30, the first 6 verses, when they arrive in Ziklag, things have gone horribly wrong. Because while they've been gone, the Amalekites have come. And the Amalekites have taken every woman, every child captive. They haven't killed them. They've taken them as captives and led them away. Now tell me how you would feel if you returned from something like that to your home and you found that your wife, your children, along with others around you, had been taken captive. Would you be alarmed? Ben and Matt, with these young families, would you be alarmed and ready to go do something? It says the men, now these are fighting men. These are soldiers. They're fighting men. It says the men were so distressed, they were in tears over this. They're in tears over this. And in verse 6 it says, they are in such distress that they began to speak of stoning David, of killing David. Wow. David never planned on anything like this. He never planned on anything like his men rising up against him and wanting to kill him. He never planned on all their wives, including his 2 wives, and all their families being hauled away by the Amalekites, all because he did what? All because he did what? He one day was thinking, if I would go live in the Philistine world, my life would be easier. I'm going to take the easy way out, and he never even speaks to God about it, that we have any record of. And we have plenty of record of other times him speaking to God. But he leaves God out. And the outcome is not so good. Now, my friends, I'm going to tell you, I have found that personally to be true over and over and over again. When I race forward thinking with my logic that I'm making a good decision that will make my life easier and better and whatever, and I leave God out, so often I've come to the end and say, what in this world have I done? Why did I do it this way? So I want to give you a thought that may be a benefit to every one of us. Because it never seems to work out well when we leave God out of a life where God doesn't want to be left out. Did you hear me a little earlier ago when I said that God so wants to be a part of my life every day and your life every day? That when you came to Christ, when you were immersed into Christ, you received living inside of you God's Spirit, who is God. He so much wants to be connected with us all the time that He chose to live inside of us. We never talk about this very much, but in some ways the Spirit got the hardest deal. Because it says that you and I, by our conduct, can grieve the Spirit, and we can even quench the Spirit. And every time I think I begin to live this life on my own and go my own directions, don't you know the Spirit is almost cowering down inside of me saying, why? It could be different, Ken. So here's the principle that I want you to think about. What would it be like if every day you and I got up as children of God and said openly and honestly, God, I don't have the ability to direct my own steps adequately. I have learned I don't have the ability to direct my own steps adequately. Would you, this day, direct my steps for me? Would you walk hand in hand with me through this day? Because left alone, I never get it right. What would life be if you and I would start thinking like that? Oh, I know it's a constant battle. I know I see David strong, 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 and then mess up, and then strong, strong, and now here he is leaving God out. And that's Ken's life, and that's your life. But I don't want it to be that way, and I want to put up a fight against it because God now lives inside of me all the time, and I don't have the ability to direct my own steps. I could take all day long telling you about all my mistakes I've made in this life and how I'd like some do-overs because I directed my own steps. But it doesn't have to be anymore. Will you walk hand in hand with me? Will you direct my steps today that I might live and be what and where you want me to be?